earlier, I'm primarily Kemetic, and within Egyptian reconstructionism, which is essentially what I'm doing, we are probably one of the lucky lots as opposed to most other pagan traditions. We have a lot of research available to us. I've got books all over the shelf, it's loads. And more is always being found, and we always have to reevaluate our position, which can be a bit tricky when something fundamental happens and shifts your entire world viewpoint overnight, and you have to deal with that. And I've had to deal with that a number of times. But there's still huge gaps, and for that I fill in those gaps with chaos magic principles, because I sort of got introduced into that in the early 90s, and I'll come back to a little bit more of that shortly. And primarily I'm from a science background. I'm really geeky. I work in IT, always have done. So I like to incorporate science and technology in with my ritual craft. Let's see, where shall we start from there? Let's think. Well, obviously, Kemeticism is very old. You know, we're talking two extremes of magical practice going on here. And Kemeticism and Egyptian magic and mythology, theology, or whatever has influenced loads of religions and viewpoints since then. But why do I bind it with chaos magic as well as it being of interest? Well, my history, and we'll go with a potted history of how I came to be here. Early 70s, we moved into a new house, and there was a spirit present. I sensed it, the whole family sensed it, but it was centered around me. Now, I've always been a really curious, creative, inventive child, and even as an adult, I am too. And I thought, this isn't wrong. Why is this thing wanting to talk to me? Why is it always lurking? If it wanted to do harm, it would easily have had plenty of opportunity to do so. So I thought, well, let's try and talk. I tried communicating, leaving things, bits of paper around, dust, to let it try and draw. It was all crazy. Then I think probably, let's think, I was, early 70s. I was born in 71. I'm hit 50 next year. I feel like a 5-year-old still. So sort of mid-70s, I started to experience spontaneous and uncontrolled astral projection. Now, I didn't know that's what it was. I had seriously mad dreams of floating across the field, out of my body, hitting the ceiling, and then floating out the window to fly over the fields. Now, I thought this was perfectly natural. But then I realized nobody is talking about this. So I then thought, I'm not going to mention it much. I was also experiencing strange premonitions, what we now call as precognition. I'll have a very vivid dream, and then it would reenact very shortly afterwards. But the fear and sudden realization meant I couldn't move and interact. That was terrifying as a child. The worst one was in a classroom when somebody at the front actually had a fit in front of me, and I could see the build up, and I knew this girl was going to have a fit, and I could not move or interact to give a warning, and then suddenly it all kicked off. Terrifying. I still get them now, not as much as I used to, but when they hit, they are scary. So let's think, early 80s, in my last year or two at primary school, I found 2 books. One on witchcraft. It was a book of spells. Now, kids' school library, you think spells, it's just going to be good poetry. No. there was some seriously dark death magic in there as well. Curses like you would not believe. And I knew, I could feel because that there was something different about this particular book. Obviously, there was some really nice fluffy stuff and some really dark, and it was all short prose, all attributed to anonymous. I can't remember hardly any of that book. There's been a few lines that I picked up, I can still remember, and I've been searching for years. And a few years back, I found that one was a Navajo dream ritual. So I'm really quite certain that this was not just a simple kiddies book. And the other book was on Egyptian stories that utterly caught my imagination and just consumed my entire rest of my childhood. I had to learn everything about ancient Egypt. So both those books set me on this path. The reasons I think these books were there was my teacher who had that library, who had that sort of twinkle in her eye. I just connected instantly with her. I thought, there's something special about this person. And even now, when I haven't seen her in town, but others have and said she's still got quite a thing about her presence. So I think she probably was a witch, or at least had interests, and thankfully seeded that, and she certainly changed my life. So this spirit was in the background still, and my early teenage years, it sort of began to be a little bit stronger, from a vague feeling to a slight change to a pillar of light to then a human form, and then the really weird dreams of a woman in my dreams all the time talking to me. And eventually, I think it was probably around 15, 16, it all kicked off. I connected so many dots. A book that I found on Tutankhamun, sort of during the mid-80s, the catalogue from one of his exhibitions in the UK, had a picture of a statue that most people would probably recognise is of her, Salket, scorpion goddess. Quite a famous statue, four of them, four sisters, Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Salket. And it was this picture in that catalogue. I haven't got it handy. It's down there somewhere. Oh, no, it's not. Yes, I've got it. There we go. That wasn't too far away. Yes, this book. You know, I've had this since the 80s. Okay, here we go. It was... Here we go. Where are we? Yep, there we go. Finding this, let's get it without the sun on, in a dark and wet market stall. It caught my attention, and that picture was the most beautiful piece of art I had ever seen in my life, and I still think it is the most beautiful piece of art. It's certainly an unusual in the whole of Egyptian canon of art, mainly because Egyptian art, the face is generally should be front forward, but hers, they're all side on. Totally unique within Egyptian art. And I fell in love with that picture, and I just kept looking at it. And then, you know, it came to be that was one of the signs that said, this is her, who she is. And it gave me a name I could then call to. And wow, when I started talking by name to her, woo, my dreams got stronger. Now, this leads me, I think, to what the conversation I was when I joined Zoom was on lucid dream. Now, problem is, now this was late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't a lot of books and material out there. The internet, while still was around and in research places, wasn't accessible for any material. especially even Egyptology and Kemetic material. The local bookshop for me would have been Canterbury. In one of the back corners, I found some sort of pagan, but it was all the classical stuff, you know, Crowley, Golden Dawn, Israel Regardie, all of the usual, really old classic Western magical tradition stuff. And that really wasn't me. It gave me a little bit of grounding in ritual practice, but you know, Golden Dawn did have some foundations on Egyptian magic. So there were some bits that could hold my attention, but it wasn't everything. And my thirst for knowledge was phenomenal and still is. So by sheer chance, I was on an old UK sort of bulletin board kind of thing. The US equivalent was called CompuServe. In the UK, we had one called Kix. It's still going, CIX. I'm still got my Kix account and I still go on the forum once in a while. But the occult conferences there were extremely well attended, and they were mostly all to do populated by chaos magicians. And I sort of mentioned that I needed to find a better, closer connection with my goddess. And seeing of my creativity, my lucid state that I could achieve extremely easy, it was suggested I look at astral projection and lucid dream. I explored and I find it extremely easy, but then that's because I think I've always had those skills. I picked up a book probably in the last few years, Robert Bruce, Astral Dynamics. Amazing book. And he put a name on what it was that I do. And it's wake-induced lucid dream. It's effectively lucid dream, but you go in with the imagery and triggers already in place. You send and work within that framework, with that model within your head, and then go in. Now, I created decades ago, at that time, a visualized temple that I could work with and meet my goddess. And it's a great place. You know, some people have caves, woodlands. I prefer an Egyptian temple because that's my way. You know, I'm not covering half the stuff I want to do now. Oh, so you see, this is it. It's just, you know, the way it goes. So let's get on to if we can go to some of that as questions later on, because you're all being very quiet. I usually have a lot of hecklers by now. Okay, so
well, I can heckle if you like.
Go on, then.
Could you just repeat the name of your goddess? I didn't catch it.
Right. That's one of the joys of Kemeticism. There's lots of names for her. It's Salket, Selket. That's the English version. There's a Greek form of Salkis, Selkis. Now, the problem is it's Egyptian words don't have vowels. So we have to fill in the vowels the best we can. So sometimes the S, the K sound and the T sound are changed around. So it could be a S, could be an S or a C, or the K sound can be a Q or a KH or a K. And well, the T is easy because that's T, but it's generally not pronounced anyway. So I tend to use English names in general chat. Like I would say Isis or Nephthys or Nephthys, Neith, and that's Selket. But when I'm doing ritual, I will use it's not been an active language since 328 AD, when paganism was outlawed and everything died off. So we don't quite know the pronunciations. We go by approximation via Coptic, which is the closest language that's still around for it. So I use as close as I can, and that is Serket. Serket. scorpion female, which is just generally a goddess. For Isis, Aset. Neith is Net, and Nephthys, Nebet. So I tend to reserve those for pure ritual use only, so that I can get a little bit different from, you know, the otherness away from mundane, which comes to the another aspect. This room is my ritual space. You can't see too well. Let me tip there. Yeah. Let's go finger. That's where my goddess statue usually sits. And there's also a Sekhmet, a Hathor. Oh, that's my Hathor there, which you won't see, but hey. Then I've got this massive bast, which I picked up at the Tutankhamun exhibition earlier in the year. I wanted it. It was shiny. I wanted the Ptah statue, but that was like 200 quid. And I'm going to be buying that. Then I've got a Min statue out of wood I made during lockdown because I was bored. Over on here, I've got loads of other statues. Oh, I'm going to have to do it. This is like show and tell. I love this. Well, I'll grab him. One of my other favourite guys, Bez. Now, he's a slightly chaotic statue as well. Bez is a household deity, bit of a trickster, some connecting with Bacchus under the Greek, because he likes a good time, much like Hathor. I have over 40 festivals a year, half of them are for Hathor, because she likes a good party to get drunk and eat lots of food. Best kind of festivals I like. And Bez is really good. He's a very powerful guy. I love him. But anyway, where should we go next? Oh yes, the interaction with Kemeticism and chaos magic, seeing that's where we are. So within Kemeticism, there's a core set of concepts. Mart, the concept of Mart, M-A-A-T. It's sort of encapsulated by the goddess Mart. She's got wings and a feather on her head. I've got a picture up there, but I can't reach it. And the concept is truth, justice, harmony, effectively the opposite to Isfet, which is chaos, the natural order of the world, and we try to enforce Mart upon it to make it slightly more hospitable to us. So the whole concept within Kemeticism is to maintain Mart, to be a good person, to be law-abiding, honourable, and nice. And lots of other stuff too, but hey. So this sort of acknowledgement of chaotic forces is important. And this is where sort of some of the interest within chaos magic kicked in. I explored chaos magic initially for the visualization and astral side. But then as I've got in, I found more about this acknowledgement of chaotic forces and working with them and the world around us. For example, as I said, I'm just down in sunny Dover at the moment. I have a river and the sea with me. I've never been too far from the sea. And I love using sea magic, water magic. Magic with around water is phenomenally important to me, also to the Egyptians, so it sort of combines. And weather magic, which I seem to have had a natural sort of thing for, which again, Egyptians' magic was very good on weather and storms. And the use of chaotic forces. Another part of this, as it worked out more recently, Salket forms a sort of triad as a part of my sort of belief system. She is my primary goddess. Her sort of consort was Horus the Elder, not the Horus that everybody knows with the bird, but Horus the Elder is a different version of Horus. He then became the Binu bird, which then most Greeks then refer to as the phoenix. Now, this is where a lot of Egyptian stuff gets really weird and blows people's heads out, because there's a lot of contradiction and paradoxes, which they assumed were perfectly normal. For example, creation, the world was created from the sea called Nun. It was just a chaotic, sort of stormy, boiling water. The world born from that, Ra, or whoever creator god you want, and there's multiple creator gods, which adds the confusion, created all the other gods. Now, there's this particular one, which probably is going to be hard to see. Let's see, I can get that on my camera. Yeah. Now, he is Nehebkau. He is a serpent deity. Well, he is a serpent deity now. He was pre-creation. He and all the other demons, we call them, not necessarily the same demons as Christianity calls demons, but the chaotic forces, he was one of them. And he did such a good job, Ra elevated him to deity. Now, he was before creation, before Ra was created, yet he is also the son of my goddess, who was created after creation, after Ra was created, and he created all the other deities. So, but that's normal. He's the son of a goddess that is younger than him. No problem. Gets confusing. But, so a sort of a triad within order and chaos, and a chaotic deity and a few other things sort of appeals to me. Now, another aspect that I find fascinating that links both is symbolism. Symbolism is fundamental to Egyptian Kemetic practice. Hieroglyphs maybe early on were words as a form of communication, but that every single symbol, all those beautiful ornate symbols, are pure magic, pure Heka in themselves. For example, if you were to write someone's name in hieroglyphics and you wanted them to cease existing, you would strike out the hieroglyphics that had their name. That would erase them from history, and it happened. Akhenaten, the heretic, his name was wiped out from every kind of statue, temple. He was erased from history, which is why things took ages to find out where he was and so on. So those symbols, they have multiple phonetic value. They also have immense symbolism and magical capabilities. One such one, as everybody probably instantly knows, the Ankh. Now, that is a hieroglyph of life. It's also used as a symbol for mirror, and many mirror cases, as in the Tutankhamun catalogue, for example, is an Ankh. So you have this handle and then you have the mirror in the top. So you combine multiple layers of symbology within a certain item. More, and probably the most well-known stuff, is all the amulets. Now we've got another one, the scarab, the Kepri, sun-related thing. Now, Egyptians loved their amulets, not just in death, but even in life. They were phenomenal producers. In fact, this is possibly the most prolific amulet they ever produced. Probably because it was also really easy to make. So that, and the crossover with sigil work, that within chaos magic, has great value to me. I don't normally show people my sigil stuff because, you know, it tends to be quite thing, but this is one I've currently I've had on my desk, just trying to get it so the sun isn't on it completely. Now, that's a combination. We have standard sigil work in the middle, and then I have 5 Egyptian phrases around, and then we've got Shen, the stability symbol, to bind everything together. So I combine both because, you know, it's, as I said, hieroglyphics have a huge, deep magical effect too, as well as being useful within sigil magic. Let's see how else we got. Oh yes. Now, one of the other huge complexities within Kemeticism is ritual practice. There's two areas. There is temple practice and household practice, and they are both considerably different. Household practice generally is more ancestor based, simple stuff. No one really knows huge amount about how it was practiced at home because they were mobile and nothing survived, really, very little. So we think it's all sort of small statues, you know, such as these, plunked on a niche and some simple words. Now, temple practice, on the other hand, is tricky for modern Kemetic practice, mainly because the ritual purity to attain temple equivalent is extreme. Shaving, complete hair removal, constant bathing, cleanliness, massively constricted diet for 3 months of the year because there was on rotation. Now, I'm starting to lose mine and I've just shaved loads of it off for lockdown, which actually I'm quite good because it gets me closer to my temple practice. So I've only been out in public once before with full Egyptian makeup and stuff, and I won first prize for that. So this was another reason for working with astral magic and dream state, was because getting all the makeup, jewelry, the purification rites was such a huge bind because, you know, I can't then go to work and I'm covered in makeup and stuff. They wouldn't mind anyway. I needed a means to sort of switch from mundane to another form quickly to perform ritual and then back again to the mundane. So working within a visualized state has been fantastic because I can enter into an astral form of me in a purified state in my ritual location, in a purified ritual temple, do the stuff and come back again. It's taken a lot of work. I've got loads of stuff on my website and all how the techniques I've used. So I think that might actually be in the Facebook stuff, House of Kia. Now, not just the physical presence, but the frequency is phenomenal too. I said I have 40 festivals a year. Most of those are one day, but there's 3 where they are 10-day festivals each, requiring sunrise, noon, and sunset rituals with complete purification throughout. Now, I can't do that because I actually have a job. So I can't maintain that level of constant for 10 days. The Egyptian calendar week was a 10-day week with 1 day off. We're lucky there. So their rituals would tend to be a 10-day festival. That's why it's 10 days for each of those big ones. So what I have is I have an automated system to help me with the ritual side. It's a sort of botnet kind of stuff. I have a number, I have an IRC server. If those who don't know what that is, it's sort of like really old school chat server. It's all text, no graphics. It's just textual messaging. And in there, I have a number of automated AI bots that I've written that perform my rituals for me at the set times that I need to.
Brilliant.
Because I'm not getting up at dawn every day. Now, I have to say, they perform it every day as well, because you know the Temple of Karnak, for example, had these rituals constantly 3 times a day, all the time, and you know I like to have some sleep every now and again. So, and they also help with some of the bigger festivals. What's also really weird, and it's worth trying this kind of stuff, is that sometimes I have them physically present. I set up little devices, Raspberry Pis, they're little tiny computer things, hook them up to speakers and place them around the room. And to hear them recite the script for the ritual around me with these disembodied voices, it is freaky and amazing. Because generally Kemeticism practice in temple use is solitary. This is probably one of the benefits of being a Kemetic. I can't find anybody. They're hard to get out of from underneath the rocks. So practicing in ritual within a solitary practice is perfectly fine. Generally, Egyptian magic is a business transaction between the high priest or priestess and the deity. So within this space, normally, would be dark, shed loads of incense. It's these things. I make a capet ball. It's freaky stuff. Recipes on my website. It's frankincense, myrrh, mastic, cinnamon, juniper, mint, and then the ball's made from a fermented. I've got another batch going here of wine, honey, and dates, and it's all mashed together into a goo and then dried. These are over a year old and no sign of any kind of mold. Capet.
Can you spell it?
K-A-P-E-T. Greeks call it, K-A-P-E-T. Greeks call it Kiffy.
Oh, Kiffy. We can sell that at Airy Fairy. Kiffy.
Yeah.
K-Y-P-A.
Yeah. Well, I make my own, the loose incense, and these balls. Yeah, these are about a year old and they are still in perfect condition. So the room would be full of incense, almost choking, but you know, frankincense is just awesome. And a bit psychedelic, also with the cinnamon as well in it. Good hit. Yep, that's the spelling. I just know.
It's a nutmeg as well.
I was having a word with Julian Vane last weekend, and yes, this is a good tip actually with the nutmeg. I make a mulled wine. Now, most people make the mulled wine, then drink it. Now, if you let it steep for a few days longer, and then drink it over about a week, things get really interesting. I have some freaky dreams after a good week of drinking that stuff. The nutmeg really, really helps. So yes, so it's generally a solitary thing, me, deity, or one of the other deities, and it's a business transaction. They were very pragmatic and quite practical, and they loved their gods, they were important to them, but it was a transaction. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. If you don't, I will go to another deity and talk to them and won't give you any offerings. So that tends to bring the deities online. So for physical practice, I tend to keep things simple. Everything's in the dark. There's only one festival I do outdoors, which is the first day of my summer solstice. I will do that outdoors in the sun because that's for Ra. But every other ritual, everything else is in the dark. Let's think. Oh yes, it's another good crossover for
Could I just ask a question before you move on?
Yep.
Is that okay? So, because that's what you told us to do.
I did.
So, my question just was, so the way you practice in the modern age, having your bots to do your rituals, because there's so many of them and things like that. When people, oh sorry, just bear with me, it's owl o'clock. We just have to wait for it to stop. Okay, oh no, one more. Okay, that's owl o'clock over. So the people practicing these rituals in ancient Egyptian times, they would be the temple and the acolytes. Everyday people wouldn't be practicing them, and they would just, that would be their life, just ritual practice, nothing else.
Yeah, the way the temples worked was you didn't have money, so you would pay your sort of taxes in kind through barter. So you would either work on a government project like temple building, or you would serve for 3 months in a temple and then come back into the community afterwards with some extra skills that you could then flog on, because you would probably learn divination and rituals and healing and so on. So you could then use those in your mundane life for a bit of extra income. So it was more predominantly this in the early part of Egyptian history. Later on, temple priesthood was more privileged. It was those that could afford it, and they excluded the general public. But the general public as a whole would not enter temple space because it was purified for the deities. The big celebrations, festivals, the statues would tend to be carted out, paraded around the village and towns and so on. Everybody would have a party outside, but the actual communication with deity would be within the temple shrine with only 2 or 3 people present and locked away. The only difference would be the Akhenaton, where they were all outside because it was a sun-based solar deity kind of thing. So those rituals were outside, but everything was generally locked away. At home, no one knows. Probably, as I said, the Dala Medina, the craftsman village, they did find sort of platforms right by the front door of every house with sort of slight niches in. So the feel, and some of the remains sort of suggest there were statues or fragments of statues found around them. So it suggests that at home, people had an altar by the front door that they could then use either on entry exit or as a focal point to do sort of ancestor-based worship or whatever deities they chose. But the temples were a state religion. They were purely to do with the beneficiary of Egypt as a whole, not for the people. They sometimes had shrines on the sides so people could go on and petition the deities if they had questions or seek healing or whatever. But the core function of a shrine was to uphold the state and to protect Egypt and to act as proxy for Pharaoh, who was the divine representation of deity on earth. The high priest would be his proxy in each of the temples. The scale is immense. On the decline of Egypt in sort of about 1200 AD, BC, temple documentation for Karnak was that there was over 80,000 people serving that temple as either supplying materials into it, administration. It is immense. You know, that you think like the Vatican is complex and big. That was Karnak, and that was replicated over Egypt. It was a phenomenal system. You'd serve your 3 months at the temple. You would be paid in offerings that were left over from rituals. So you got a cut depending on your hierarchy of how much of the offerings would be your food. You could still serve, do oracles or whatever for the public. There weren't that huge restrictions, maybe food, certain dietary restrictions, depending on what temples you were working at. But, you know, they were pretty much free to do it. They just had to serve in whatever way they were led to. There was no sort of secrecy. The words actually for most of the rituals were written on all the doorways. So if there was a procession, the priest could actually just read across the door for their next stop. Generally public, they couldn't read anyway. So, you know, it was like an auto cue for the ritual. It was brilliant. But again, it was thing. Now, as far as the magical practice goes, in Western magic, we tend to do a lot of cleansing. Egyptian magic, not so much. Temples were fixed space, so therefore they were cleansed, and they would be continuously cleansed along with the person. They would be swept on a daily basis all the time. At home, again, we don't know what happened at home. Obviously, they tried to probably keep clean because they were a very clean people. Because they, you know, if you got sick, you were going to die. So they try to keep everything as pure, as clean as possible for much of the time. But as far as ritual magic goes, there was no casting of a circle. There was only one instance where you would cast a circle, and that was generally for protection of a child at birth. And that was using a curved wand, ivory wand. So generally magic was just done on the spot. Now, there were certainly encircling, enclosing temples, walls, that were used for sort of creating a barrier between inside and outside, but purely as a sort of a general theological view, not as a magical thing. Let's see, where else are we going to go? Oh, thought forms. This is a good one. Now, I got introduced to thought forms, and I found them really interesting. And then I discovered that Egyptian deities, quite a lot of them, have minions of their own. For example, my goddess, she has 7 scorpions that serve her, and they are actually referred to in the Kemetic stela in the Metropolitan Museum, USA. It's 7 scorpions. Now, this may sound familiar if I recite the phrase that was actually which Isis used. Tofan and Bofan before me, Mestet, Mesetetef beside me, Potet, Thotet, Maatet behind me. Now, it's a sort of similar ring to the lesser banishing with the angels. Now, I did mention this to, what's his name? Jim Bennett. He's quite a well-known Wiccan who has Egyptology background. And I mentioned, you know, this does sound a little bit like the lesser banishing. Yeah, well, you know, Golden Dawn did nick an awful lot of stuff. So the Kemetic stela has been known for quite some time. But Isis used that as a means of protection. She summoned my goddess's minions. She's got her own, but she summoned Salket because of an issue they had. They don't get on too well, those two sisters. I don't like talking about Isis. Don't get on with her. And she summoned those 4 minions to help her navigate a marsh and protection. So I started to use these 7 scorpions as thought forms, and I used them on frequently. I use them for protection. Well, that's probably all I ever use them for is protection. And I have them placed around the house for help. And there was one good story. Many years ago, I was out clubbing, and I called them to me because, you know, some guy was kicking it off, and I thought, I'm going to need some help. So I called them away from home to be with me, got out of that problem, got home, forgot to put them back, and that night, for the first time, the house was egged for some reason. Now, the only time I took them away, and that was the only time something happened. So, you know, I think they do a really good job. Now, other deities, Sobek, the crocodile goddess, she has 7 arrows. Isis has 7 serpents. I think some of the I can't remember what the others have. Those are the only ones I can remember. But as far as thought forms go, you got to think thought forms, especially group thought forms, have great potency. And I take these as thought forms because they're not generally, they're never referenced as a individual entity. They're always associated together. So I take those as thought forms already pre-packaged for use by my goddess. And they are awesome. Saves making my own. Where else can we go? We're probably, I've been going off a long time. Let's see what else. Oh, obviously Egyptian astral bodies, 5 or 6 parts of the soul, lots of astral projection stuff going on there. Cars, bars, shoes, lots of different spirits for different subtle energy bodies. That's worth looking at if you're wanting to look at lucid dream. Oh, we could go on. I could keep going on. And she's cleared off. Where's that one gone? Well, until she comes back, if anyone's got any questions, shout, because I keep going on. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks, Kev. There's a lot in there. Lucid dreams, minions. I've got to think about minions not having being. But can I just ask, weather magic? What's weather magic?
Yeah. Now, this being sort of results-driven, chaotic kind of person, I've experimented, and I have found if it's close to me, short distance, short period, and in a relatively close time scale, the effect is like 90 odd 100% effect. If it's further away, for example, if I want to do some good holiday magic for my holiday hundreds of miles away in like 3 months time, probability of success drops rapidly. So I think it's all to do with success wise, as in being personally connected to it, local area that you're familiar with, and its short duration. Now, for example, the wife's probably never going to see this, and then we've moved on since then. The kids' school sports day. Now, it's only the school, that primary school was only just a few minutes around the corner, and I didn't want them to get wet, so I would get a small 2-3 hour window of at least dryness, if not good weather. And it was getting close, and I was thinking it's wet, and then suddenly, boom, dry for the whole sports day, and then peed it down the following day. In fact, I think there seems to be a knock-on effect. I found that if you affect the weather, then the weather takes a long time to recover the natural system following that interruption. So I try to avoid weather magic because it's quite dangerous. So, but, you know, short boosts of it sort of really work locally. Also, this Dover Valley that I'm in, we have a unique weather system anyway. It's you know, it could be brilliant sunshine here, but you go up on top of the hills to get out of town, and it could be fog. So, you know, it's a different climate weather system in this valley. So I feel a little bit better doing it. But it's sort of grown over the years. I used to walk every day a mile or two to the station across a ridge, and I used to get soaked and cold every day, and I could sense the weather change, and I could sort of nudge it a little bit just to get to work dry for a change. It's just something I've always done. not entirely certain how it works, but it works. So I
And
love it.
Is it done through like mantras, sort of visualizing it, certain things?
Well, yeah, I would say sheer force of will, really. I think, can't remember how early. Now I do it by just sheer force of will. I'm saying, well, I want that to be there and then. Years ago, might have sort of asked the goddess to have a go. Salket not particularly chewed. She's very watery, so I tend to call on her for a lot for rain. Maybe I'd call on a couple of the local deities. Shu is Shu, Nut, and Tefnut. Tefnut is good. She's moisture. So that's a good one to go with. So yeah, I sort of harass my deities, as many as possible, to sort of influence things. It's a bit of everything, really.
Okay.
But yeah, it's good.
Sorry, I had to dash off. It was the doctor ringing again.
Oh.
I've got a question. So this isn't meant to. Had you sort of finished your talk, or were they questions specifically about?
Possibly, we may. I can keep going on for hours, but.
So, well, had you said sort of most things? Are you happy for question and answers now, or had you got something?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
It's sort of not necessarily related to weather magic, but just generally, because you're working with Egyptian magic particularly. And this isn't meant to be a difficult question. It's just something I've come up with in some stuff I've done recently. Well, a few years ago, actually. But I kind of got called out for cultural appropriation, and it made me kind of think about it a bit. I mean, I have my own views. So I'm asking you your kind of views around that kind of subject. So you're using deities not of your native land, and I mean, I know what I think about it. What's your sort of take? What's your take on?
Good. One of the recent books I've written is about this because it bugs me too. Now, respect. That's all it comes down to. I don't do anything that will put a bad light on my goddess. I adore her. I cannot live without her. I have been with her decades now, and I cannot be without her. I show complete respect to every of the deities. Now I'm waving her around, but we've been together for so long that she's used to some of my weakness. But I treat them all with respect. For example, in ritual practice, I will perform something called the opening of the mouth ceremony. I make my own tools and so on and now I don't make them identical to the ancient ones because that probably could be cultural appropriation. I make them, this is a bit industrial. It's quite an offensive weapon. I try not to take it out in public. I always cut myself when I handle this. So it's got a bit of an industrial chaotic feel to it as well, but I agree, this is not my natural deity, but she wouldn't stop bugging me. So she chose me. I will be respectful all the time to these. I uphold Mart as much as I can. I'm mortal. I'm going to make mistakes. I don't like to sort of wear Egyptian things just because it's a stylistic thing. It's not stylistic. This is my life. I have been with these deities since childhood. I incorporate as much as I can into my daily life. I use daily ritual. I am devoted to them. if this was just a fad, then that would be cultural appropriation. If this was, oh, you know, I only do these for the festival, I only care about the deities for a festival because I can get drunk and eat lots of food, that would be wrong. No, these are part of my life constantly. So I think I'm fine. I'm certainly aware of other people's views, and I do tread carefully. I do as much respect as I possibly can, because that's all I can do. It is a difficult subject and people do find it uncomfortable, but ultimately these gods will judge me. And I know personally that if when I upset her, she really makes me know it, physically makes me know it. And she saved my life many times. I've got loads of stories on that, but we probably ain't got time for near-death experiences that she saved me from. So I must be doing something right. And they give me things that I need. If they didn't, then I'm wrong. And I'll accept that. And I will change or stop. But yeah, I hope that, yeah, it's something, and it bugs me too. But
yeah,
I try to be the best I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose that I have similar thoughts around cultural appropriation, but it is something that comes up. So I think it's always a good thing to ask about and talk about as part of a wider group, so people understand where you are coming from and that these are things you've thought about. But yeah, I think that's a great answer. Is there anybody else who's got any questions for Kevin? We're coming up to the end of our coffee morning. Yeah, it's been really fascinating. I've not known a lot about Egyptian practices. I have been to Egypt and visited temples and things, but they don't really talk about the spiritual aspect in a practical sense. When you do the tours and things, they talk about it in a really sort of from an aspect of a pharaoh, really, and the aspect of the temple, but they don't talk about what people did in the daily practices and who did what.
This is the problem. This is the problem with Egyptology. Egyptology generally kicked off because of treasure hunting, and then later on Victorians' interest in trying to prove biblical stories. Then even right up until the 1950s, this was still the case, and still some element of that still exists within Egyptology. They are changing to be more interested in experimental archaeology, which is basically reconstructionism. You know, I make these things, so, and the incenses that I make and the food that recipes that I recreate for my daily life. Experimental archaeology plays a part in reconstructionism. They want to some do want to try reintroduce some of the more spiritual aspect to Egyptology, but as a hard science, there's a lot of resistance against that, because that is mysticism, not hard science by fact. So a lot of Egyptology research is just factual. This is it. It's up to you to make a decision what you think this context is. So it's really hard, and it takes an awful lot of book research for a Kemetic practitioner to get anywhere. And there's a lot of conflicting stuff. It's a hard path to follow, but it's not one I'm ever gonna give up on, because I absolutely adore it. The people, the songs of the harper. You see, this is what I'm going on even further. The songs of the harper, for example, a beautiful piece of literature on love poetry, and that shows me the depth of their feelings. For example, this one phrase, "we embrace." The arms are around me, and I am overwhelmed with drugs. Her lips part, we kiss, and I am drunk without beer. It's beautiful imagery, and it does tell you an awful lot about their thinking and their feeling about the world around them. So look up the Songs of the Harper. The love poetry, I did it as I do storytelling as well, and I recited some of this up at one of the local folk nights, and people were astounded at the modern feel to their love poetry and the daily lives, all the problems that we have now. It's just that they worry about a donkey when we worry about a car. You know, it's we haven't changed. We are the same people, but technology level has changed. Yeah, I keep going. We'll have to stop.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Any questions that you want, I'm easy to find. And on the Facebook thing, I think you put loads of links anyway. So I'm always open to chat.
Okay.